The alarm screamed through the small cargo ship as Connor Shaw fought with the controls. Red lights flashed everywhere. The engine was dying, and he could feel the ship falling toward the planet below. Come on, he muttered through his teeth. His hands moved fast over the buttons and switches, but nothing worked. The ship shook hard, and he could see fire through the small window on his left. Connor was 32 years old. He had served 8 years as a Marine before he got tired of war and became a cargo pilot instead. He flew alone most of the time, carrying supplies between human colonies on the edge of known space. It was quiet work. Simple work. He liked it that way. But today, his luck had run out. The ship, which he called the Dust Runner, had been flying through a part of space he did not know well. His navigation system had shown it as empty, but clearly that information was wrong. Very wrong. The planet below was beautiful in a terrible way. It had purple oceans and silver forests that stretched across its surface like veins. Great cities rose from the land, their towers reaching toward the sky like fingers made of glass and light. Connor had no time to admire it. He was going to crash. He pulled the emergency lever and felt the ship's nose lift slightly. It was not enough to stop the fall, but maybe enough to survive it. He strapped himself tight into his seat and closed his eyes. The crash was violent. Metal screamed and tore. Connor felt his body thrown forward, then back, then sideways. His head hit something hard, and for a moment, everything went black. When he opened his eyes again, smoke filled the cabin. He coughed and unbuckled himself with shaking hands. His body hurt everywhere, but he could move. Nothing was broken. He had been lucky. He kicked open the damaged door and stepped outside. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with metal. The sky above was pale green, and 2 small moons hung low on the horizon. Connor stood in the middle of a field of silver grass that came up to his waist. His ship lay behind him, broken and burning. He did not have to wait long. Within minutes, he heard a sound in the sky. He looked up and saw several flying vehicles approaching. They were sleek and elegant, shaped like teardrops, and they made almost no noise as they landed around him in a circle. Figures stepped out of the vehicles. Connor's breath caught in his throat. They were tall, much taller than him, with skin that shimmered silver blue in the light. Their eyes were large and dark, like pools of ink. They wore armor that seemed to flow like water over their bodies, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. One of them spoke. The words were strange, but a moment later, a small device on his belt crackled and translated them. "You will come with us, creature. Do not resist." Connor raised his hand slowly. He knew when he was beaten. "No problem," he said. "I'm just a pilot. My ship broke down. I mean no harm." The aliens looked at each other. They seemed confused by his calm response. Perhaps they had expected him to fight or to beg. Connor didn't either. He simply waited. They put restraints on his wrists and led him to one of their vehicles. The inside was strange, but comfortable. The seats molded to his body in a way that felt almost alive. He tried not to think about it too much. The vehicle flew over the silver forests and toward one of the great cities he had seen from above. Up close, it was even more impressive. The buildings were made of a material that looked like crystal, and they glowed softly from within. Bridges connected the towers at different levels, and smaller vehicles flew between them like insects. They brought him to a massive structure at the center of the city. It was a palace, he realized. The largest and most beautiful building of them all. Inside, everything was white and gold. The floors were smooth as glass, and the ceilings were so high that Connor could barely see them. Guards stood everywhere, watching him with those dark, unblinking eyes. They took him to a large room and made him stand in the center. Around him, a circle of important-looking aliens sat on raised platforms. They studied him like he was an animal in a cage. One of them spoke. The translator in his belt worked again. "What are you?" The alien asked. "We've never seen your kind before." "I'm human," Connor said. "From a planet called Earth. I'm just a cargo pilot. I was passing through this area when my ship failed." The aliens whispered among themselves. He heard words like primitive and curious and dangerous. Connor stood still and kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that showing fear only made things worse. So he waited. From somewhere above, a door opened. Connor looked up and saw a balcony overlooking the room. A figure stood there, watching. It was a female. He could tell that much. She was different from the others. Her skin was a lighter shade of blue, almost white, and she wore a crown of small lights that floated around her head like stars. Her eyes found his and stayed there. Connor met her gaze and did not look away. The female tilted her head slightly. Something like a smile touched her lips. Then she turned and disappeared through the door behind her. "You will stay here," one of the officials announced. "Your ship will be repaired, but it will take 6 lunar cycles. Until then, you are a guest of the Kirathai Empire. You will be given quarters and food. You will not cause trouble." Connor nodded. "Understood. Thank you." The official seemed surprised by his politeness. Perhaps visitors to this world usually behave differently. They led him to a small but comfortable room in the outer part of the palace. It had a bed, a window that looked out over the city, and a small bathroom. Simple, but clean. Connor sat on the bed and let out a long breath. He was alive. He was stuck on an alien world with no way to contact home, but he was alive. 6 months, he thought. He could handle 6 months. He had survived worse. What he did not know, as he lay down to sleep that first night, was that the female on the balcony was Princess Valith Seren, heir to the entire Kirathai Empire. And she had already begun to form a plan that would change Connor's life forever. Outside his window, the 2 moons rose higher into the green sky, and the city glowed like a dream. Somewhere in the palace, Valith stood at her own window, thinking about the strange creature who had fallen from the stars. He was not afraid, she thought. All the others who came here were afraid, but not him. She smiled to herself in the darkness. Perhaps this human would be useful after all. 3 weeks passed on Valanthos Prime. Connor learned to live among the Kirathai, though he never felt welcome. The aliens were polite to him, but distant. They looked at him the way a person might look at a strange insect that had wandered into their home. Curious, but also slightly disgusted. He was smaller than them, rougher, and in their eyes, primitive. Connor did not let it bother him. He kept to himself, explored the areas he was allowed to visit, and counted the days until his ship would be ready. But everything changed on the 23rd day. He was eating his morning meal in a small garden near his quarters when a shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw Princess Valith standing there. 2 guards waited behind her at a respectful distance. Connor started to stand, but she waved her hand. "Stay," she said. Her voice was soft but carried authority. "I wish to speak with you." She sat down across from him on the stone bench. Up close, she was even more striking. Her silver-white skin seemed to glow faintly, and her dark eyes held a sharp intelligence. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. "Connor Shaw," he replied. "And you are the princess, Valith Seren." She studied him for a long moment. "You are not afraid of me. Should I be? Most beings are. I could have you killed with a single word." Connor shrugged. "I guess I'd be dead. But being scared wouldn't stop that, would it?" Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or amusement. "You are strange," she said. "Our males do not speak this way. They are careful, controlled. They say only what they think I want to hear. Sounds boring." Valith laughed. It was a small sound, quickly hidden but real. "It is," she admitted. "Very boring." She looked away, toward the silver trees that surrounded the garden. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I need your help, Connor Shaw." He raised an eyebrow. "My help? I'm just a cargo pilot stuck on your planet." "What could I possibly do for a princess?" Valeth turned back to face him. Her expression was serious now. "In 12 days, there will be a ceremony called the Choosing. It is an ancient tradition. I must select a consort from among the warriors presented to me. The male I choose will one day rule beside me as king." Sounds important. It is. It is. And I hate it. Her hands tightened in her lap. "The favorite candidate is High Commander Zorath. He is powerful, ambitious, and cruel. If I choose him, he will drag our empire into wars we cannot win. He has already made plans to attack neighboring systems." Connor felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Neighboring systems? You mean human colonies?" "Among others, yes. Zorath believes the Kirathai are superior to all other species. He wishes to prove it through conquest." Valeth met his eyes. "If he becomes king, millions will die. Perhaps billions." Connor was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "What can I do?" "There is a loophole in our law," Valeth said. "The princess may choose any warrior who has proven himself in combat. He does not have to be Kirathai. He does not have to be noble. He only has to pass the trial of flames." Connor understood now. "You want me to enter the trial?" "Yes. And if I pass, you'll choose me instead of Zorath." "Yes." He leaned back and looked up at the green sky. This was insane. He was a pilot, not a warrior. Not anymore, anyway. He had left that life behind years ago. "What is this trial of flames?" he asked. 3 challenges: endurance, combat, and sacrifice. They are designed for Kirathai physiology. Our warriors train their entire lives for them. Many still fail. She paused. No off-worlder has ever attempted the trial. Most believe it would be impossible for one to survive. "So you want me to do something impossible?" "I want you to do something unexpected." Valeth leaned forward. "Our people do not understand humans. They think you are weak because you are small, primitive because your technology is different. But I have watched you these past weeks. You are not weak. You simply hide your strength." Connor thought about it. He thought about the quiet life he had built for himself, flying cargo between stars. He thought about going home, back to Earth, back to normal dot, but then he thought about what Valeth had said. War, conquest, human colonies burning. He could not ignore that. "What happens if I fail?" he asked. "You will probably die. And if I refuse?" Valeth's expression did not change, but something sad entered her eyes. "Then I will be forced to choose Zorath, and everything I have described will come to pass." "I do not ask you to do this for me, Connor Shaw. I ask you to do it for everyone who will suffer if you do not." Connor was silent for a long time. The wind moved through the silver trees, making them sing with a soft musical sound. Finally, he spoke. "How do I enter?" Valeth's eyes widened. "You will do it?" "I didn't say I'd win. I said I'd enter." He stood up and looked down at her. "Where I come from, we have a saying. Sometimes the only way out is through. I've been in bad situations before. I'm still here." Valeth rose to her feet. She was taller than him by almost a head, but somehow, in that moment, Connor did not feel small. "The trial begins in 10 days, she said. "I will arrange everything. You will need to train. I'll manage." She hesitated, then reached out and touched his arm. Her skin was cool, almost cold, but the gesture was warm. "Thank you," she said softly. "Whatever happens, thank you." Then she turned and walked away, her guards falling into step behind her. Connor watched her go. His heart was beating fast, though he kept his face calm. 10 days. 3 impossible challenges. An empire watching. He had survived wars, crashes, and years of loneliness in deep space. He had faced death more times than he could count, but this was different. This was not just about survival. This was about proving something, not just to the Kirathai, but to himself. He walked back to his quarters and stood at the window, looking out at the alien city. Somewhere out there, High Commander Zorath was preparing for his easy victory. He had no idea that a small, primitive human was about to stand in his way. Connor smiled grimly. Let him underestimate me, he thought. That's always been humanity's greatest weapon. They never see us coming until it's too late. The Grand Arena was the largest structure Connor had ever seen. It rose from the ground like a mountain made of white stone and glass, its walls curved and smooth. 50,000 Kirathai filled the seats, their dark eyes fixed on the sandy floor below. Connor stood at the entrance, wearing simple clothing they had given him. No armor, no weapons. Those would come later, if he survived long enough. Beside him stood 6 Kirathai warriors. They were the other candidates for the trial. Each one was tall, muscled, and covered in ceremonial marks. They looked at Connor with something between confusion and contempt. One of them, a massive warrior with scars across his chest, leaned down toward Connor. You should leave, little creature, he said. This trial is not for your kind. You will die in the first challenge. Connor looked up at him calmly. Maybe, but I'm not leaving. The warrior laughed and turned away. A horn sounded, deep and long. The crowd went silent. The first challenge had begun. They called it the Path of Fire. The candidates had to cross a long stretch of burning ground while avoiding obstacles that rose and fell from the floor. The heat was intense, designed to push Kirathai bodies to their limit. Connor felt the heat hit him like a wall as he stepped onto the path. His skin immediately began to sweat, and his lungs burned with every breath. The Kirathai warriors moved ahead of him, their long legs carrying them quickly across the flames. But Connor had something they did not understand. Humans evolved on a world where heat was a constant danger. They developed the ability to sweat, to cool their bodies in ways the Kirathai could not. And more than that, humans had something else, a stubbornness that ran deeper than bone. The first hour was terrible. Connor's feet blistered, his vision blurred. Twice, he nearly fell, but he kept moving. The second hour was worse. 2 Kirathai warriors collapsed from exhaustion, their bodies giving out despite their training. The medical teams rushed to pull them from the flames. Connor kept moving. By the third hour, his mind had gone quiet. There was no thought, no fear. There was only the next step, and the next, and the next. His body screamed at him to stop, but he had learned long ago how to ignore that voice. When he finally reached the end of the path, he fell to his knees. His clothing was burned in places, and his skin was red and raw. But he was alive. The crowd was silent. They had expected him to fall first. Instead, he had outlasted half the Kirathai candidates. The second challenge came the next day. It was called the Circle of Blood. Each remaining candidate had to fight a champion chosen by the arena masters. The champions were the best fighters in the Empire, veterans of countless battles. Connor's opponent was a female warrior named Keshra. She was fast, graceful, and deadly. Her blade moved like water, and her eyes showed no mercy. The fight began. Keshra attacked immediately, her blade slicing toward Connor's throat. He ducked and rolled, barely avoiding the strike. She was faster than him, stronger than him, and her reach was longer. But Connor had fought enemies before. Not in arenas, but in the mud and blood of real battlefields. He had learned that war was not about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest. He let her attack. Again and again, she came at him, and again and again. He dodged or blocked just enough to survive. He studied her movements, looking for patterns out there. A small hesitation when she stepped to the left. A slight drop in her guard after a high strike. Connor waited for his moment. When it came, he moved. He ducked under her blade, stepped inside her reach, and drove his elbow into her side. She gasped and stumbled. Before she could recover, he grabbed her arm and twisted, forcing her to drop her weapon. She fought back, but Connor held on. He locked his legs around her and used his weight to drag her down. On the ground, size mattered less. Technique mattered more. For 30 long seconds, they struggled. Finally, Keshra's hand slapped the ground 3 times. The signal of surrender. Connor let go and stood up slowly. His body ached, and blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. But he had one thought: the crowd did not cheer. They were too shocked. A human, a small primitive creature, had defeated one of their champions. The final challenge came on the 3rd day. It was called the offering. Each candidate had to give up something precious, something that proved their commitment to the Empire. Most Kirathai offered treasures, lands, or titles. Connor had none of those things. He owned nothing on this world except the clothes on his back and the broken ship in the repair yard. When his turn came, he walked to the center of the arena. The crowd watched in silence. "I have nothing to offer," he said, his voice carrying across the vast space. "No gold, no land, no title." He paused and looked up at the royal box where Princess Valith sat beside her mother, the queen. Their eyes met. "But I do have one thing," Connor continued. "The only thing that still connects me to my home." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was the navigation core from his ship, the only thing that could guide him back to human space. Without it, he would never find his way home. "This is my way back to Earth," he said, "to everything I've ever known. My family, my people, my world." He knelt down and placed the device on the ground in front of him. "I give it up, not for treasure or glory, but because some things are more important than going home." Then he raised his fist and brought it down hard. The device shattered into 1,000 pieces. The arena was completely silent. Connor stood up and faced the crowd. "I don't know your customs. I don't know your history. But I know that sometimes a warrior has to sacrifice everything for what's right. That's what I offer. Everything I have. Everything I am." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a sound began to build. It started as a low murmur, then grew louder. It was not cheering, not exactly. It was something deeper. Respect. The Kirathai were a proud people. They valued strength and honor above all else. And in that moment, they recognized both in this small, strange human. Connor had passed all 3 trials. He looked up at the royal box again. Valith was smiling, and even the queen seemed impressed. But in the shadows behind them, Connor noticed another figure watching. High Commander Zorath. His face was twisted with rage. This was not over. Connor knew that. The real battle was still to come. But for now, he had done the impossible. He had proven that humans were not to be underestimated. The throne room of the Kirathai Empire was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Nobles in flowing robes stood beside military commanders in gleaming armor. Representatives from a dozen allied systems watched from the upper balconies. At the center of it all stood Connor Shaw. He had been given formal clothing for the ceremony. Dark fabric with silver threads that caught the light when he moved. It felt strange against his skin, too soft and too fine for a cargo pilot who was used to worn jackets and work boots. Princess Valith sat on a raised platform at the front of the room. She wore a crown of floating lights, and her gown shimmered like starlight on water. Beside her sat Queen Ithara, old but still sharp-eyed, watching everything with careful attention. High Commander Zorath stood among the other candidates who had survived the trials. There were only 3 of them now, not counting Connor. Zorath was the tallest and strongest, his armor decorated with medals from battles across the Empire. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fire. The ceremony began with ancient words spoken by a priest in white robes. Connor understood only some of them through his translator, but he grasped the meaning. This was a moment that would shape the future of the Empire. Finally, the priest turned to Valeth. Princess Valeth Siren, heir to the throne of the Kurathe Empire, you have seen the warriors who offer themselves to you. You have watched them prove their worth in the Trial of Flames. Now, the choice is yours. Who will stand beside you as consort? The room went silent. Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Valeth rose from her seat. She looked over the candidates slowly, letting her gaze rest on each one. When her eyes reached Zorath, he straightened proudly, certain of victory. Then her eyes moved to Connor. I have made my choice, she said. Her voice was clear and strong. I choose the one who showed not just strength, but wisdom. Not just courage, but sacrifice. I choose the one who gave up everything, even his way home, for a world that was not his own. She raised her hand and pointed. I choose Connor Shaw. For a moment, nothing happened. The room seemed frozen in shock. Then the chaos began. Nobles shouted in protest. Some demanded explanations. Others called the choice an insult to Kirathai blood. The sound grew louder and louder until it filled the throne room like a storm. Through it all, Connor stood still. He had expected this reaction. He kept his eyes on Valith, and she kept hers on him. Queen Ithara raised her hand, and slowly, the room went quiet. My daughter has made her choice according to our ancient laws, the queen said. The human passed all 3 trials. He is eligible to be chosen. The law is clear. The law is an insult. Zorath stepped forward, his voice sharp with anger. This creature is not one of us. He is small, weak, and primitive. How can he stand beside our princess? How can he one day rule our empire? Connor finally spoke. I don't want to rule anything. Everyone turned to look at him. I didn't come here looking for power, he continued. I crashed on your planet by accident. I entered the trial because I was asked to, not because I wanted glory. I don't care about your throne or your titles. He looked at Zorath directly. But I do care about what kind of future this empire will have. I've heard what you wanted to do. War. Conquest. Destroying everyone who's different from you. That's not strength. That's fear. Zorath's face twisted with rage. You dare lecture me? You, a primitive ape from a backwater world? I dare because I've seen what war does. Connor's voice was quiet but steady. I've seen cities burn. I've seen children orphaned. I've held friends as they died in the mud. War isn't glory. It's suffering. And anyone who seeks it out without good reason isn't a warrior. He's a coward hiding behind a sword. The room was completely silent now. No one moved. Zorath took a step closer to Connor. His hand moved to the weapon at his side. You speak of cowardice, he said softly. Let us see if you can back up those words. He turned to the queen. I invoke the right of blood challenge. By ancient law, a rejected suitor may fight the chosen consort for the right to claim what was denied to him. Queen Ithra's face showed no emotion. You invoke a law that has not been used in 300 years. It is still law. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Very well. If the human accepts, the challenge will be honored. Everyone looked at Connor. He knew what this meant. A fight to the death against the greatest warrior in the Kirathe Empire. A man who had trained his entire life for combat, who had killed more enemies than Connor could count. He should have been afraid. Part of him was, but a larger part felt something different. A cold, calm certainty that had carried him through every impossible moment of his life. "I accept," he said. Valeth stood up quickly. "Connor, no. You don't have to do this. We can find another way." He looked at her and shook his head gently. "There is no other way. You know that. If I refuse, he wins by default. Everything you've worked for disappears." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I didn't come this far to back down now." Zorath laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "Brave words from a dead man. The duel will take place tomorrow at dawn in the Grand Arena. I will enjoy teaching you the true meaning of pain. Human." He turned and walked out of the throne room, his followers trailing behind him. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispering among themselves. Connor stayed where he was until only Valeth and the Queen remained. Valeth came down from the platform and stood before him. Her eyes were wet, though she tried to hide it. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why did you accept? You could have refused. You could have lived." Connor looked at her for a long moment. "Where I come from, there's a saying. Some fights you can walk away from. Some fights you can't. This is one of the ones I can't." He reached out and touched her hand gently. "You took a chance on me. You believed I could be something more than just a visitor passing through. I'm not going to let you down." Valeth squeezed his hand tightly. "You are the strangest being I have ever met, Connor Shaw. I get that a lot." She almost smiled. Then her expression grew serious again. "Zorath has never lost a duel. He's stronger, faster, and more skilled than any warrior in the Empire. I know. You cannot defeat him in a fair fight." Connor's eyes hardened. "Then I won't fight fair." He turned and walked toward the door, leaving Valeth standing alone in the empty throne room. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on the greatest fight of his life, and the entire galaxy would be watching. Dawn came slowly to Valentos Prime. The green sky turned pale gold as the sun rose over the silver forests, casting long shadows across the grand arena. Connor stood in the fighter's chamber beneath the arena floor. He wore simple combat clothing, and in his hand he held a borrowed blade. It was lighter than the weapons he had trained with on Earth, but it would have to do. Through the stone walls, he could hear the crowd gathering above. 50,000 voices merged into a single roar of sound. They had come to watch him die. He did not blame them. In their eyes, this fight was already over. High Commander Zorath was the greatest warrior their empire had produced in 100 years. He had won 47 duels without a single defeat. His strength was legendary. His skill was perfect. Connor was just a human. Small, weak, primitive. He smiled grimly to himself. Let them think that. Surprise had always been humanity's greatest weapon. The iron gate in front of him began to rise. Sunlight poured in, blinding him for a moment. Then he stepped forward onto the sand of the arena floor. The crowd fell silent as he walked to the center. Across from him, another gate opened, and Zorath emerged. The High Commander was dressed in ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished silver. His blade was longer than Connor's, heavier, and its edge glowed faintly with some kind of energy field. He moved with the easy confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. They stopped 10 paces apart. In the royal box above, Princess Valeth watched with pale features. Queen Ithara sat beside her, expression unreadable. The entire empire held its breath. A horn sounded. The duel began. Zorath attacked immediately. His blade came down in a devastating arc that would have split Connor in half if it had connected. But Connor was not there. He had already moved, rolling to the side, feeling the wind of the blade pass inches from his face. He counterattacked, a quick thrust toward Zoreth's side. The commander blocked it easily and responded with a backhand strike that caught Connor across the chest. Pain exploded through him as he stumbled backward. The armor had protected him, but barely. "Is that all you have, human?" Zoreth circled him slowly. "I expected more from the creature who passed the trial of flames." Connor said nothing. He watched. He waited. Zoreth attacked again, faster this time. A flurry of strikes that drove Connor back across the sand. He blocked what he could, dodged what he could not, and absorbed the rest with his body. Each hit sent agony through his muscles. Each blow drove him closer to the arena wall. The crowd began to cheer. They could smell blood. They knew the end was coming. Zoreth pressed his advantage. His blade moved like lightning, cutting through Connor's defenses. A slash opened a wound on Connor's arm. Another drew blood from his leg. He was being taken apart piece by piece, but Connor did not fall. Every time Zoreth thought he had finished him, Connor rose again. Every time the crowd expected him to collapse, he stayed on his feet. His face was pale, his body covered in blood and sweat, but his eyes remained focused. Zoreth's expression began to change. Confusion replaced confidence. Frustration replaced arrogance. "Why won't you die?" he demanded. Connor spat blood onto the sand. "Because humans don't know when to quit. It's our greatest flaw." He raised his blade again. "And our greatest strength." He attacked. For the first time in the fight, Connor moved forward instead of back. His strikes were not elegant or precise. They were wild, desperate, and completely unpredictable. He fought like a wounded animal, throwing away technique in favor of raw aggression. Zoreth was caught off guard. He had trained against the best warriors in the galaxy, but none of them fought like this. None of them seemed to ignore pain the way this human did. None of them attacked when they should have been dead. Connor's blade found its mark. A cut appeared on Zoreth's cheek, the first wound the commander had suffered in decades. Blue blood dripped down his face. The crowd went silent in shock. Zoreth roared with rage and attacked with renewed fury. His blade became a blur of light and steel. He would not be humiliated by this creature. He would not lose to a primitive ape from a forgotten world. But something had changed. Zoreth was fighting angry now, not smart. His movements became sloppy, his timing off. He had never faced an opponent who pushed him this far, and he did not know how to handle it. Connor saw the opening he had been waiting for. When Zoreth overextended on a heavy strike, Connor stepped inside his reach. He dropped his blade and grabbed Zoreth's sore arm with both hands. Then he twisted with every ounce of strength he had left. The snap of breaking bone echoed across the arena. Zoreth screamed and dropped his weapon. Connor kicked it away and drove his knee into the commander's stomach. Zoreth doubled over, and Connor grabbed his head, pulling it down to meet his rising elbow. The strike connected with a sickening crack. Zoreth fell to his knees, dazed and beaten. His arm hung useless at his side, and blood poured from his broken nose. Connor stepped back and picked up Zoreth's fallen blade. He raised it high, ready to deliver the killing blow. The crowd held its breath. Valeth gripped the railing of the royal box so hard her knuckles turned white. Connor looked down at his defeated enemy. Zoreth stared back with hate-filled eyes, waiting for death. Slowly, Connor lowered the blade. "No," he said quietly. Zoreth's expression shifted to confusion. "What are you doing?" "Finish it. This is how our duels end." Connor threw the sword away. It clattered on the sand several feet distant. "A true warrior knows when the fight is over," he said. "Killing you now wouldn't prove anything. It would just make me like you." He turned his back on Zoreth and faced the royal box. The entire arena was completely silent. "I came to your world as a visitor," Connor said, his voice carrying across the vast space. I never asked to be part of your traditions, your politics, or your wars. But I was asked to stand for something, and I did. Not because I wanted power, but because I believed it was right. He looked directly at Valeth. I'm not a HFY warrior. I'm just a human who was taught that strength means protecting the weak, not crushing them. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the hardest choice a soldier can make. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly Queen Athara rose to her feet. She looked at the broken commander on the sand, then at the small human standing victorious beside him. The challenge is complete, she announced. The human has won. My daughter's choice stands. Connor Shaw will be her consort. The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in something Connor never expected. Applause, cheering, thousands of Kirathai voices raised in admiration for the tiny human who had defeated their greatest warrior and then shown him mercy. Valeth was crying now, tears of relief and joy streaming down her silver-blue face. Connor stood alone in the center of the arena, bloody and exhausted, as the sun rose fully above the horizon. He had come to this world by accident. He had stayed because someone believed in him. And now, somehow, he had become something more than a visitor. He had become a legend. In the records of the Kirathai Empire. A new entry was made that day. A warning for any who might threaten the worlds under their protection. Do not underestimate the humans. They do not know how to surrender. They do not know how to die. And when you think you have them beaten, that is when they are most dangerous. Connor Shaw smiled as Valeth ran across the sand to embrace him. He was a long way from home. But standing here, holding her in his arms, he realized something important. Sometimes home is not a place. Sometimes it is a person. And sometimes the best journeys are the ones you never planned to take.